So tonight I want to talk about Donald Trump's pardon spree. That is, within the last week or so, Donald Trump has issued over a dozen pardons or other grants of clemency. Now, before I tell you who these people are that Donald Trump has been giving a pardon to, first let's talk about Donald Trump's first day in office, because that was the day when he gave 1,550 pardons and grants of clemency to the insurrectionists who attacked the U.S. Capitol, hundreds of which beat police officers and gouged them and bear sprayed them. That was among the most egregious demonstrations of his abuse of the pardon power. Now, before I get into the more recent specifics, it's fair to say that I think President Biden also abused the pardon power, but on a very different scale. I don't think he should have given pardons to his own family members. And as I said at the time, I don't think he should have given pardons to the members of the January 6th committee, including myself. In fact, I urged the administration not to do so because I felt it would set a terrible precedent. And I also worried that Donald Trump would abuse the power, would use that precedent and abuse the power far, far worse. And that is exactly what has happened. So let's look at some of the pardons. They fit into a number of categories. You have people he pardoned because they gave great big contributions to Donald Trump. You have others that he pardoned because they're Republicans, they were corrupt elected officials, and they made the same bogus claim of political prosecution that Donald Trump likes to make. And then finally, you have pardons and clemency that were given to people for God knows what reason. And the problem with all of these pardons, of course, is that it nullifies jury verdicts. It makes a mockery of the idea that there is one system of justice for the rich and powerful and for everyone else. And when Donald Trump does this, it just makes the rule of law look like a joke. That is the worst casualty of his abuse of the pardon power. When used properly, it can be a great thing. It can give people a second chance who have earned it, who have made restitution, who have admitted wrongdoing. That is not the circumstance with the people I'm about to tell you about. So let's start out with the most recent rash of pardons. Michael Grimm. Michael Grimm was a Republican member of Congress. He was convicted of tax evasion, of failing to file over $1 million in gross receipts. But Michael Grimm, this Republican congressman, is not alone. He is one of 8 Republican members of Congress that Donald Trump has given a pardon or clemency to. 8. All of them Republicans, all of them given clemency or a pardon by Donald Trump. Now, Michael Grimm, like the others, because they're not stupid, pleaded, "Oh, Donald, political persecution just like you, I'm a victim just like you," and apparently that's all it takes to get a pardon. Ed Martin, who was defeated as the nominee for the U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia, is now in charge of the Pardon Office. You might remember Liz Oyer formerly held that title. Ms. Oyer was fired simply because she wouldn't agree to give Mel Gibson's gun back after a domestic restraining order prohibited him from getting another gun. So she was fired, replaced by Ed Martin, who was defeated because of his close affiliation with Nazi sympathizers, because of his undeclared hundreds of appearances on Russian Kremlin media, because of his unethical, improper actions as acting U.S. Attorney. That guy was made the head of the Pardon Office, and that guy, following some of these pardons, said, "Leave no MAGA behind." That's right, the head of the Pardon Office, his view is leave no MAGA behind. So if you're a MAGA criminal, hats off to you, you get a break from Donald Trump. But Michael Grimm is not the only one to get a pardon, not by a long stretch.
Oh, what the hell? I pardoned him too.
So the next to receive a pardon are Julie and Todd Chrisley. The Chrisleys are reality TV stars. They were convicted of bank fraud and tax evasion in the amount of about $30 million, which they used to fund their lavish lifestyle. Their daughter, Savannah, is a supporter of Donald Trump. She spoke at the Republican convention.
He called us the Trumps of the South.
And guess what? That earned a pardon for her parents. The fact that the Chrisleys are major crooks didn't matter. Your daughter speaks at the Republican convention, you get a pass. And here's the interesting part. Their accountant was also convicted. But guess what? The accountant didn't get a pardon. I guess the accountant didn't have a child at the Republican convention singing Donald Trump's praises. The next is Michael Harris, or Harry O., the founder of Death Row Records. He was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, but he endorsed Donald Trump, and he is now the recipient of a pardon. Jeremy Hutchinson also received a pardon. Jeremy Hutchinson is a Republican senator and the nephew of Asa Hutchinson, a Republican former governor. He, like some of the other Republican electeds like Michael Grimm, made the false claim that he was the victim of some kind of political persecution, a la Donald Trump's false claims. He got a pardon. Governor John Rowland got a pardon. Governor John Rowland, again, another Republican. This is someone who was going to be impeached by his state legislature. He was then convicted of corruption charges. About a decade later, he was convicted of more corruption charges. He gets a pardon. Larry Hoover, otherwise known as King Larry, was a major drug kingpin in the 1970s. He was serving consecutive life sentences. He received a commutation from Donald Trump at the request, at the urging of Kanye West. He, at the time, was known for ordering the murder of a rival gang member and led a gang that distributed about $100 million in drugs throughout the Chicago area. I guess having a character witness like Kanye West is really helpful in getting clemency these days. Ahmad Zuberi is a venture capitalist. He received commutation for a 17-year sentence, but this was a guy who contributed over $1 million to Donald Trump's campaign or his inaugural. This is someone who also was convicted of obstructing an investigation into where $900,000 of that contribution came from. He gets relief from Donald Trump. This is Scott Jenkins, former sheriff. He was convicted of taking $75,000 in bribes to deputize people, to allow them to get out of speeding tickets and to carry weapons. He was about to report for a 10-year sentence for that corruption when he received a pardon from Donald Trump. He was an outspoken supporter of Donald Trump. And I guess that's all you needed. So if you're a crooked cop, apparently all that is necessary for you to get relief from your bribery conviction is a vocal support for the President of the United States. This is Ross Ulbricht, a former tech entrepreneur who started a site called Silk Road on the dark web to distribute vast amounts of illegal drugs. This is what federal prosecutors said in a statement at the time of his sentencing. Ulbricht also demonstrated a willingness to use violence to protect his criminal enterprise and the anonymity of its users, soliciting 6 murders for hire in connection with operating the site, although there is no evidence that these murders were carried out. Now, this is a very partial list, but the last one I want to feature tonight is Paul Walczak. Paul Walczak was convicted of tax crimes which included defrauding his own employees. He was set to serve 18 months and pay a $4.4 million fine. That is before Walczak's mother attended a $1 million a plate fundraiser for Donald Trump. And less than 3 weeks after she attended that fundraiser, Walczak got his pardon. At the time the judge handed down the sentence in the Walczak case, he wanted to make a point, and his point was, as he said, the rich do not get a get-out-of-jail-free card. Sadly, under Donald Trump, that is exactly what they get.
Oh, what the hell? I pardoned him too.